talking to book people about books and other stuff.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Talking to Book People about books and other stuff, in which I chat with Dan Richards, inveterate explorer, author of books such as Climbing Days and Outpost, most recently, which is just out in paperback, and is all about being stuck in hidden away places all around the world. Right now, he's stuck in Edinburgh, and it's going to be fascinating to hear what he has to say about lockdown life from a man who does not normally deal with staying in one place terribly well. You're going to see a quick wardrobe change from me, and are going to have the addition of some hair because the original version of this intro failed the soundbite test. So this is a new intro to a chat I did with Dan just a few days ago. So let's see how it all plays out. Enjoy. Hi, how's it going? And so where are you, Dan?
I'm up in Edinburgh, which is fine. It's quite quiet. We're at a kind of crossroads, so normally it would be very busy outside. We've got a nice view of the street, so we see lots of good dogs, which is always a joy.
Nice.
And fairly sort of, I suppose, paranoid. I mean, there's a lot of paranoid joggers who seem very sort of like, but then they always seem like that, but more so at the moment. There's a lot of kind of people running big circles around other people. They were always doing that, but now even more so. The main thing that I'm aware of is that some people are really taking it seriously and are at pains to get out of the way and social distance. Other people seem to be playing a version of kind of pavement chicken, where they kind of almost, they're thinking, well, I'm not going to move because I moved before I met you. So, they're kind of walking along thinking, I always move. I'm always the good guy. But, mostly it's fine. It's been so nice in terms of also, people coming out to clap and meeting your neighbours. And meeting a nice lady over the road who's been there for years, and people sitting outside getting a bit of sun. So it's nice. I feel more connected.
Where are you? Are you writing something at the moment?
I was right at the start of an idea, which was looking at what happens overnight to kind of reset the world while we're all sleeping. Deliveries, people on the freight trains, people in the NHS, all of this stuff. Basically everything that currently is going on wonderfully to sort of help everyone. I was going, and the power stations, the national grid. I've just always been interested in what goes on at night. And Samantha Harvey recently wrote the wonderful Shapeless Unease about insomnia. So I was just at the start of getting in touch with people and beginning to write the couple of chapters that I always begin, or I need those done before I can get my publishers and my editor and my agent involved properly. I always kind of like write my way some of the way into a book. And I have not quite written my way into the book. And then this happened. And people were saying no to me getting up front in a freight train cab before this kicked off. Right. And now I imagine they wouldn't even respond to the emails at all. Equally, can I come into a kind of, a ward in the NHS when people are giving birth? I was talking to my friend Hannah, who's a doctor, and she said the month I want to be in there is kind of August. You want to be on a maternity ward with the junior doctors who have just started and are really worried, and it's going to be kind of like you've got the mothers and you've got the and the fathers and the junior doctors, and this kind of crossover at night. That's one of the most amazing things to be part of, because there's just such this atmosphere of people being sort of like terrified, but at the same time really excited because it's all happening. So maybe next year, but
or maybe you could be the first person to zoom in to or Skype into a maternity ward.
I mean, I can imagine it would be brief. I can imagine the sort of like the big screen on the wall with you. My face.
That is unfortunate, though. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, for you, more than novelists and what have you, the going to places is a big part of the job.
But it is what it is. I mean, I think one always has to work with what you've got. It's always impossible one way or the other. With Outpost, it was impossible for me to get to. First it was impossible for me to get up to Svalbard at all, and then it wasn't. And I think there's that element of challenge, and also the element of kind of going with whatever is at hand, and trying to make the best of it. I mean, it's been very interesting, all of this from a point of view of insomnia, the point of view of being awake at night, a point of view of really thinking about the close at hand. And so that might weave its way in. It's interesting. I don't know what's going to happen when the restrictions are lifted, whether people will sort of think of, oh yeah, that was the Zoom year, or now we're kind of this sort of thing is going to happen more. Is it possible to work from home was always the question before for a lot of people. Got a lot of people with invisible disability and things, can you do what you do from home?
Yeah.
And they were always told no, it's impossible, we don't have that connectivity. Now we do, because the vast majority need it.
Yeah.
And so that conversation about how that works is interesting.
I think especially in office-based jobs, I mean, because I think when this gets unraveled, it's going to be done in a piecemeal way, and and offices will definitely not be the first ones to be told, yeah, it's fine to go back, because of especially in London, burden on public transport, etc. And I think there's going to be a lot of calls for that portion, a lot of roles to be done from home.
Yeah, and this idea, the vicarious or not needing to be there, it is now factored into my thinking. I'm a travel writer, and I would always, as you said, I would always go.
Yeah.
But we're now in a place where people aren't going so much. I mean, talking to people about the Outpost book, some people have been really sort of like happy that was written at a time when you could go, when one went places, and they're enjoying it vicariously, and having that kind of almost dream, because books are amazing where you're in this little machine and you're in someone's imagination and you're being told a story and all of this stuff. But I think that's particularly powerful now, where people there's a thing with people not sleeping, where I think people are overcharged. They're not able to walk off their angst and walk off, work things through. They're now not sleeping, or if they are sleeping, having these most amazing sort of Blakean sort of psychedelic dreams.
Yeah, that's becoming a thing. I keep reading about that. Yeah.
And I think there's quite a bit of that in the Outpost book, where I think charged landscapes or moments of quite sort of existential sort of, concern for people often trigger these things. And, the fact that you are going, say, to a building that you are told is haunted.
Yeah.
And then everything goes in a certain way. There's a certain element of your self-fulfilling prophecy about that. At the same time, me just saying to you, oh, by the way, everyone's having crazy dreams. It's like, are they? Okay, cool. I should really
better have one of those. For those people who don't know where you went to in the Outpost, and don't know about Outpost, and the fact that you effectively wrote a travel writing exploration of places where people go to self-isolate with extreme prescience, as it turns out. Tell us about it.
So the kind of elevator pitch for the book, I guess, is where are the wild places on the edge where people have either gone as springboards to further exploration, or the sort of, I suppose, outposts where creative people have brought wildness inside, so they are more creative crucibles.
Yeah.
So the book starts with just before my birth, when my dad comes back from an expedition where he's been up in Svalbard, which is towards the North Pole, the last land before the top of the earth. He's been up there on a geological expedition, and he brings home two things. One is a photograph of he and his team outside this very ordinary garden shed. It looks like named Hotel California on the back of the photograph is what's written. Later I discover it's called Yanzabu, which is just as good. It's, becomes my Xanadu of what happened to this shed. The second thing he brings back is a very old polar bear pelvis that he found whilst he was up there, and manages to just put it in his kit and sort of, manages basically to get it back to Pencloud in South Wales. And that acts as this amazing prism of adventure throughout my childhood, the most amazing object that's full of story. So Outpost begins with me looking at these two objects and thinking, okay, this is a prism full of story. This is an amazing shed. Where are the other amazing sheds that people have kind of like used as springboards to adventure? Why do people go to the ends of the world? And, my previous book was about climbing and alpinism and high mountaineering. And I encountered the most extraordinary set of sort of huts and cabins above the snow line.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were manned, often by a very bad-tempered Swiss lady who, for let's say £100, would cook you some rosti and give you a beer, and then you would climb higher to mountains and the mountaintop.
Yeah.
But I had no idea before the book that those places existed. That such cabins were there. And so I began just thinking about where are the places that people perhaps have never considered, which they would be surprised and delighted to know exist.
Yeah.
And so to answer your single question, which so far I've failed to do, I went to Iceland. I went to the interior hinterland of Iceland to visit these cabins called Sælahús, which translate as houses of joy, originally built by the Norse to make basically dots to be joined on long walks across fairly barren, bleak, cold tundra. And some of them look like magical KLF pyramids that people have just built out of sort of hardboard and aluminium. And others look like kind of igloos if that were made of stone and turf. And others look like perfectly lovely bunkhouses that were built in the 30s, like the one Kvitarnes, which I visited. And it turned out that building is the most haunted building in Iceland. And the bar for that is set quite high. I was unaware that this was the most haunted building in Iceland until I'd been there for a bit, when it became quite apparent that there was something going on. And then where else do I go? I go to lighthouses in the North Atlantic. Off the coast of France. I go to Japan to see some amazing temples that are over 1,000 years old and really perched up mountains on spindly little wooden legs. And I went to Copenhagen to visit Simon Starling, the wonderful artist who won the Turner Prize with Shed Boat Shed, where he found a lovely, quite sort of like chirpy looking shed at the side of the Rhine. It had an oar that was nailed to the front, and that gave him the idea that the shed should have an adventure, because it looked like quite an adventurous kind of shed. So he rebuilt the shed as this punt, filled the rest of the punt with the rest of the shed, punted it down to Basel, to his gallery, and then rebuilt it exactly as the original shed.
Part of this and part of what you do is about the difficulties getting there and the journey there. It's not, and it's not beautiful, clean descriptions of a place. It's about the struggle to get there and warts and all travel, which that shed certainly had.
Yes, I think that the shed is really my spirit animal. A lot of people, the feedback on the book, people sometimes want the destination first and foremost. But my point is always that that's the problem. We live in an Instagram age where people want to go and see the same stuff. And when I was doing the mountain book, the view from slightly below the summit is still good. I don't mean don't go to the summit, but you don't have to camp on the summit for an hour taking pictures where there's a queue, and that sort of thing becomes deadly and very problematic when you're on somewhere that's a destination like Everest. In terms of getting there, though, and going the way less traveled to perhaps iconic places, there are a few places in Outpost which are kind of well known. Probably the best one that is in the kind of general public's imagination would be Desolation Peak, which is the fire lookout cabin on top of a mountain up towards the Canadian border, where Jack Kerouac spent 63 days in the mid-50s and was there as a fire lookout. So it was his job to call in any smoke that he saw on the horizon or nearby where trees were on fire.
Did he write about that? Is that in Lonesome Traveller he wrote about it?
Yeah, there's a brilliant essay in Lonesome Traveller called Alone on a Mountaintop, and he had a horrible time. He went there to prove to himself that he was this amazing sort of bebop man cub, hobo kind of lonesome guy, an outdoorsman. And 2 weeks in, he'd run out of tobacco and was smoking coffee grounds. Right. And, he had the most amazing poker tournament with his invisible friends. And he was crawling about in the attic and reading all the little rat-chewed, mouse-chewed bits of paper. Right. And he went stir crazy. One of the sort of, I suppose, ways that manifests is that Desolation Peak features in, as you said, Alone on a Mountaintop. It's also in Desolation Angels. It's also in Derma Bums. Right. And it's somewhere else as well. It crops up about 4 times in different ways. Yeah. And each time that Kerouac goes back and remanifests as himself in the stories, because he might have an alter ego or a nom de guerre, but it's essentially Kerouac every time. by the time you get to sort of like the later stuff, he's brilliant. You know, he is the outdoorsman. You know, he's a proto Bear Grylls. You'd absolutely want him with you. Whereas the early stuff, when he's actually being slightly more honest, he's like, no, I'm kind of like sleepless from terror.
And which of the places that you went to, and I'm assuming it's not the haunted Icelandic hut, which of those places would you have most been comfortable with if lockdown had occurred whilst you were there?
Well, one of the places I went to was an amazing residency in Switzerland, where it was the Jan Michalski Foundation, and they had commissioned architects from all over the world to design these tree houses, sort of brutalist plywood, triple glazed, lovely tree houses, which would hang on this amazing, quite Blade Runner gantry. You have to imagine Blade Runner crossed with Heidi, and the foot of the Jura Mountains. They were lovely, you know, and it was great, and it was triple glazed, and it was nice, and you were looked after. They had a lovely desk, a comfortable chair, and it was really a machine designed to get your author, your captive author, in your author zoo to write. Yeah, I have nothing to do but write now.
Getting anxiety. If I can't write in this situation,
I can't write here.
What have you been reading? Have you managed to read some stuff?
Yeah, nothing to do but read. I mean, that's a bit easier. You don't have to generate the content. What have I been reading? I just read last night. I finished The Importance of Music for Girls by Lavinia Greenlaw.
Right? Okay.
Which was great. And I read Orlando, Virginia Woolf, because I haven't read it. And now I have. The Underground Railroad. I read that.
Okay.
And I'm now part of I've helped organise an online book festival called BookBound 2020, which is currently running.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Well, last night I interviewed Sarah Perry and Abby Palmer as part of that. So I read The Essex Serpent and Melmoth. I'd already read The Essex Serpent, but I read Melmoth thoroughly for the first time. And Abby Palmer has just published, I think last week, she published a book called Sanatorium with Penned in the Margins, which is really, really good. She's really interesting. She's struggled with chronic pain. She went to Budapest to have a sort of water therapy, water cure. And then, which sounds amazing. It sounds like you'd go for sort of a healing spa treatment in a Wes Anderson film. I've got an event on Saturday with Philip Hoare. I mean, I love his work ever since Leviathan was the first one of his that I read. And I think Rising Tide, Falling Star, the most recent book, is fantastic. Tonight, I'm interviewing Eleanor Wasserberg and Kim Sherwood. They're both historical novelists. Both the novels we're talking about deal with the Holocaust to some degree in different ways. There's that. And I'm also talking to Stanley Donwood, Caleb Femi. I'm talking to him as well, who's a wonderful poet and performance artist and filmmaker. And I'm talking to them about the idea of the artistic, the idea of the curated, the idea of the visual.
Are they kept online afterwards? They're not. They're not just like. Is it on their Facebook? Is it a Facebook thing?
Yes. It's on YouTube. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I mean, that's been taking up quite a lot of my time because, I mean, making festivals is difficult anyway, as you know from the Bath Festival and various other things. And it's just one of those. It's like herding cats, but now we're herding cats at a distance digitally, and everyone has pretty much said yes. People are far more, perhaps open to kind of make these connections via letter or via the internet now, or Zoom, whatever, but also to get involved. You know, no one's being paid for this festival. All the money raised is going to Mind, the mental health charity, because, you know, we're not living in ordinary times, and most people will have a mental health episode, you know, Mind say every year. 1 in 4 will have, you know, something that is a notable episode. And I think this year of all years, that's going to spike.
It definitely will. It definitely will. I think it's a great thing. I mean, all this stuff that's going on, the way people are engaging and trying to engage, you know, it is actually strangely, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort for people, but I think it's fantastic. I mean, because people value having those things to go to right now. Listen, I'm going to say bye-bye now and let you go back to it. I'm really looking forward to seeing you back in Bath. Edinburgh sounds like a fine place to see it out, but I'm looking forward to chatting 3 meters across the other side of our shop from counter to.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to it. Cool. Thank you. Thanks for chatting, Dan.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Please note, no book people were harmed in the making of this film, though some were technologically challenged. All books are available from www.mrbeesemporium.com.